And we are live on Oz Property Investors. We bring the big names and we have the big fun. And we have Melanie with us joining. And I love that background poster behind you as well. I should have mentioned that before the show, but sorry, just made it interesting. How you going away, Mel?
I am fantastic, thank you. And yourself?
Just drinking a cup of tea, as you know, Wednesday nights. Get myself ready for winter warmers. So going really well. I was playing with some tech today. Not the AUS tech that Joe deals with, but for me, it's highly technical. But yeah, going well. How about you, Joe? What's happening, man?
Mate, I'm fantastic. I was watching the news and some old grandma sold her house for like 3 or 4x profit. Was it like in Sydney? So this is a very
$4 million or something.
$4.4 million. And she was very excited about it. So I'm starting to hear grumblings and rumblings about the Sydney market, where it's might have hit its bottom. We might have bottomed out for the Sydney market. Maybe not. And who else better than Melanie to bring some insights? And this is one of the most important things. I think the property manager is one of those team members that is very underutilized for property investors. Like so many people need to focus. So many investors need to focus so much more on their property manager because you can get so many great insights, so much value out of the demographics, the things that demographic wants. But you just need to pick up the phone and have a conversation with them. So that's what we did to unpack some of the Sydney insights, because maybe there's some opportunity here. I don't know. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, and I think as well, it's more about understanding the parts of the suburb where, unless you've actually lived in that area or managed property, you don't know unless you've, like if you're a local, maybe you might know, but if you're somebody buying from Queensland or buying from WA over in Sydney, you're not, unless you fly over boots on the ground, as Joe likes to do it. It's hard to get those insights if you don't. So my thoughts are that I think, yes, there are sort of even the inner west of Sydney, we started to see some really crazy, like Marrickville. There was a post that sold for 2.6 million, I think, the other week, and people were like, Marrickville is a bit dingy, and I was like, okay, how long has it been since you've been to Marrickville? I used to live just around the corner, and I thought Marrickville was quite nice. You go and get your man bun out, you get your soy latte with whatever. I mean, I don't know. I'm a bit of a hipster as well, so you wouldn't be able to tell from. No, yeah, sometimes, yeah, mate. I like a bit of non-alcoholic beer and all that sort of good stuff. So yeah, anyway, it's going well. But the person of the hour, Melanie. So what we're going to talk to tonight, we're going to unpack pockets of Sydney that Melanie looks at, and the realities of what investing in Sydney is, because everybody thinks sort of Mossman and Double Bay and all these sort of very fancy parts of Sydney where you're not gonna get change from $5 million unless you're buying an apartment. So those sort of parts aren't really the broader. That's what everybody thinks Sydney is. But I think it's good to hear what it is actually, what the larger sort of pockets. And we're going to talk to then as well. What else are we looking? Where investors are looking at the moment. So where she's getting inquiries, and also the unique aspects of property management in Sydney, because it is different to other cities in terms of what people are. I mean, rent's a lot more expensive for a start. So that's one of the things. So heaps to unpack and much more.
Oh, much more. Okay. What have we organized our quotes of the week? That is the true question. Melanie, have you got that? Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's one of those ones where we tell the guests, like, oh, by the way, you need a quote of the week, and then we're, okay, see you later. In our pre-chats, and then we always just kind of jump at, oh yeah, by the way, did you do that quote? And half the time they're like, I thought you were joking. Yeah. So what is your quote?
I do have a quote, and to be fair, this is a quote I live by anyway, with or without you guys asking for it. And I think it does. I know, just I'm a bit of a perfectionist a lot of the time, but I need to remind myself not to be all the time. It's fail early, fail often, but always fail forward. That's why John C. Maxwell, it's okay to make mistakes, but you learn, you educate yourself, and then you move forward.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great little, well, no, it's not one-liner, but it helps people as well, because it makes failure okay. I think a lot of people think failing is a bad thing, But as long as you're learning from other people's mistakes as well, I think that's where you can get the most value out of property. Is you don't want to be making these massive mistakes, because if fail and fail often, but don't fail on the big stuff that matters. If you can learn from other people like this session right now, you'll pick up a whole heap, so you don't make those massive mistakes, but fail away because you'll learn. What's your quote of the week? I don't know. Well, do you have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
No, I think we could almost do a whole podcast on these quotes show. Like Joe has to hold himself back. He's like, we can just, yeah. But mine is by the man, the Mr. Legend, Jimi Hendrix, and it's knowledge speaks, wisdom listens. So it kind of talks to what Mel was talking about, failing and sort of failing, but sort of failing forward. So I think the people who really do well in investing in a lot of things in life, they take the knowledge, but what was the quote again? So knowledge speaks, wisdom listens. So if you're wise, you'll actually take, whether you have 100 properties or whether you're sort of second or third, you'll actually listen to that person, to the insights they can give you. Whereas if you think you're sort of walking property encyclopedia, you may have the knowledge, but you may not be able to pick up all that wisdom. Is where I was going with that.
I'm all for it, mate.
What about you, Joe? Where are you going this week? Your quote? You going ancient Greek? You going? Going recent?
Well, there's a guy named Jack Welch. I don't know if anyone knows about him, but his quote is "Change before you have to." And I think it's really relevant for people. Like we have a lot of people that are very set on one thing. They're like, Sydney's king. I'm never going to change from Sydney. Well, I mean, like it may not be at the time. Is that the best place? Is that the best place to put my money? Is that the what do we say? The best property at the best price at the best location for your brief, like for what you actually need to do. So change before you have to. Like if you need to get out of an area that's not doing too well, sell it, move on. Just factor in how much it costs to actually, we need to do a post about that, Jeff, about how much it costs to actually exit out of a property, and your opportunity cost as well. Anyway, sorry, Melanie, that's not what this is about. This is not about quotes. This is about an expert property manager that is an expert at what they do, who knows an area that we know a little bit about, but I want to get some insights. I want to get some insights into some of the more interesting, more investment grade locations of Sydney. I'm keen. Anything you wanted to say, Jeff?
No, that's great. So just throw your questions, throw your comments, and drop a like, all that good stuff, people. And let's get into it, Joe. But first, you know what we got to do, and then we'll come back and we'll introduce Melanie.
The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yield, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia. And not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
Here we go, commercial property. So we're into it. We're underway, and so I'm going to introduce this bio that I read was absolutely it blew me away the amount of things you've done in your 17 years as being in the property sort of industry. But you've been achieved a whole bunch of awards, including and contributions to the industry, and including you've won a silver award, and in 2018, 2019, and 2020, you were a platinum award winner. So that's just 3 years running. Like how good is that? And you're in 2021, you won a business development or were involved in business development manager awards as well. So you are.
I also got one in 2022. It's just not on me yet.
Was it number one? Did you get number one?
I was number 4.
Oh, okay,
number 4, and then number 3, property management department as well.
Yeah, no, but it's just amazing because usually awards are super competitive and tough to win. So but I think the other thing I like to sort of talk about people is yourself and your husband enjoy renovating their home. So you are a renovator as well, and taking your dog for a walk on the beach. So how good is that? Like just the simple, the sort of finer things in life as well. The type of thing that Sydney people walk their dogs along the beaches. I don't have a dog yet, but we'll get there. So that's Melanie in a nutshell. So what we're gonna cut to the really sort of exciting stuff and talk about. So I want to know about the properties. So which areas do you focus on, Melanie, for a start?
So I basically handle any suburb that is within half an hour drive of our office. So that's all the southern suburbs of Sydney. So anywhere from Campbelltown in the southwest through to the Shire. But I specialise in Canterbury Bankstown, and even more specifically, I specialise in the Revesby ward of Canterbury Bankstown.
That's a really big area of Sydney. You must get plenty of kilometres around, because that's a sort of huge area. So should we do like a walk around the ground? Should we do around the ground show? Because I love doing that.
I'll just bring a quick little map up for Sydney for some of the people that may not be Sydneyites here, and it might be a little bit tough to see. But we're talking. Where's your office, Mel?
So I'm Revesby. The background here is actually Bankstown, what you can see behind me. But I'm in Revesby.
Okay.
So, there's Panania. Yeah, there you go.
30 minutes of this area here, which will take you into the Sutherland. Where's the Sutherland Shire? Down here.
Yeah, close to Botany, man.
Yeah, so all those areas that are sort of, I say within a half an hour drive. As you know, Sydney traffic, that can change very quickly. But yeah, so it's Campbelltown LGA, LGA, Canterbury Bankstown LGA, the Sutherland Shire, like Hurstville region, Georges River region.
Well, what I like because this is the challenge that a lot of people have with the Sydney market, is it's very unaffordable. Like, it's not one of these markets that you're like, you know what, I'm a first-time investor. I've got my first job. I want to buy my first property. I'm going to end up my first property being in Sydney. But the areas that you're talking about are the more, at some point, in Sydney perspective, are the more affordable locations. So if you are an investor and you are thinking, you know what, I really do want to get into Sydney, these are some of the pockets to think about. But I'd love to get some of your thoughts of the areas that you kind of serve, and also if you have any other knowledge of any of the other areas as well. Like, where are you seeing the most amount of opportunity for investors out there?
So look, I think what's important to note is I see the investor inquiry that comes through my office. I obviously don't necessarily see like all investor inquiry from different areas or anything, but what I'm finding more specifically is what kind of properties the investors are inquiring about. So in my area, I'm getting a lot of, basically, if I search the word investor in my email, basically every inquiry is basically on a duplex in my region. So all the investor inquiries are coming through for our duplexes or duplex sites. We do also get quite a few for a house where they might have granny flat potential. So whilst we cover quite a large area, as obviously it's predominantly that Canterbury Bankstown region, but all those river suburbs that go like Picnic Point, East Hills, Padstow Heights, and then we've got the Panania and Revesby. Those are the main areas that I cover, and it's all duplexes in that area. That's what people are inquiring about.
And how does it go for like renting those type of assets? I know that, like, you know, in some of the more regional markets that investors go ahead and purchase in, it's like, oh, I don't know about getting a duplex. It's not as desirable. It's not the type of asset that these people buy. How is that reflected in Sydney, do you think? People are okay with a duplex?
There's such high demand for it. So these properties are also getting quite good prices. A new duplex is being built all the time, but there's so much rental demand that it's okay. Like most of our duplexes at the moment are going on the market and at more than $900 per week. And they're usually leasing in the space of, they're usually done by the first open house.
Wow.
You know, and we even have a handful that make it up to the $1,500 per week mark.
Wow.
Should we look at and bring up some of the examples now, Joe, or is it too early in the piece?
I don't know. Let's have a look. We got some examples here, people. Don't be too upset if you're listening at home on the podcast, because it's not too visually exciting, but it is good to have the visual of what we're talking about here. Am I on the right one? Number one?
If you open up the Canterbury Bankstown one, there is an example of one duplex on there. That was one of my own personal listings. So we've got on there, it was sold in December last year. Now it's sold for 1.4. It's a 6-bedroom. So it's 5 bedrooms in the actual duplex, and it has a 1-bedroom granny flat out the back, and it leased altogether for $1,200 per week. And I think at least in 5 days.
You trying to crunch the numbers on it, Joe? I think Joe's
No, I'm more interested in this.
Oh, I thought it sold
in February 2018, which you would have paid what, 80, 90 grand in stamp duty, in February 2018, and it sold in December 2022 for $1.4 million. So it grew $20,000 in that period of time. Oh boy.
Yeah, so what's interesting about that one is obviously it would have been brand new at the time when it was purchased the first time. And then it's obviously, gotten older, gotten more worn. It was owner occupied before it got sold. And then we've rented it out for a premium price. But as I said before, these statistics that I did send over, they're not necessarily great quality statistics. They're just real statistics. And I made sure I provided, 3 properties in each LGA. So Liverpool, Bankstown and Campbelltown, just to give people real stats of properties that literally have sold and leased in the last 3 months.
Yeah. And so that's a 4.45% yield.
That's not too bad, is it, Joe? So everybody who says, "Oh, yeah, you can only when you buy in Sydney, you're only getting yield of 3%." There we go. I think we've just debunked a bit of a myth. Maybe that's not a myth, but.
And if I'm honest, I could probably re-let that tomorrow for another $100.
There we go.
Only in the space of 2 months?
Yeah, 4.7. I bet they locked it down for 12 months, maybe even throw. Actually, what are you seeing out there when it comes to rentals for people for a product like this? Are people just lined out the door ready to throw money at you? Are they throwing extra, hey, let's
from a tenant's perspective? So with the duplexes, because that's our, the highest prices we're achieving, with properties that are, say, around that 800 mark, we've got people lining up out the front for an $800 per week. When you get up to the 1,000 mark, there's still decent amounts, but, I can easily get them all through in a 15-minute open house. But as we get over that $1,000 mark, they're quite few and far between, but they're generally, we don't necessarily need as many people because, the people with that kind of budget, they've got the money. So it's not that we're making sure that the references are all good and everything, of course, but we only need that one good application. Whereas in the cheaper markets, there's multiple applications, but you get a few applications that are a bit, how's it going,
A little bit. You know what? Maybe thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. So there are less people looking at the over 1,000.
But the interesting thing as well is on this is the reason like you're talking February 2018, Joe. That was almost close to the peak of that's when the 2018, I think the election was in 2018. Yeah, it was a 3-year kind of. So the election was in March or April or May 2018. That's when you started, like, negative gearing was starting to be talked about. So people hadn't sort of realized. So that's almost pretty much bang on close to the peak of that Sydney kind of market. When that 60, I think that's around roughly the time in the 60 minutes, kind of, you know, that thing where everything was going to absolutely explode, like capitulate. That's when that came out. And then so people had already bought. And then they've just sort of, it probably went down to, I don't know for sure, but I reckon it would have gone down to about 1.1 million, maybe even let's say 1.05 million. And so it's then sort of bounced back and recovered over COVID. That's what I imagine what has happened there. So
yeah, and it was brand new off the plan kind of purchase, right? Like that makes a massive.
And it was also owner occupied. So before then, it was an owner had purchased it to move into. So
built it to whatever they wanted it to do.
Okay, cool. One, and then Yaguna, look at that.
Yanguna is looking.
Yaguna, Joe, not Yang. No, I can find Joe's finally said something wrong. I mean, I'm normally the one who butchers it.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, I know that. Eric,
I know the WA. I should know Yanguna. Yeah, whatever.
Yaguna. There's no
Yaguna.
In there.
There's not.
Okay. What I found interesting about this one is because I was doing this research on RP data literally like 2 hours ago, just quickly put it into a slide. That property I think could have achieved so much more per week. It was actually quite a tired property inside, you know, had a 90s kitchen. It was, you know, dated bathrooms and things like that. And I thought to myself, oh, well, you know, if an owner wanted to really, you know, maximize on that rent, it could have easily been renovated to get more rent as well. But obviously 750 is still high when you compare it to some of the other, you know, other regions of Australia as well.
Well, it's a full house though, isn't it? 5 bed, 2 bath, 1 car. Like, how, when it comes to like doing that type of renovation work, like, how much would they have had to have spent to make it? I guess that's what we're trying to do, right? Is as an investor, optimize that cash and capital. If you're going to get an extra $80, $100 a week rent, you want to kind of, if you're going to spend $50,000 on it, hey,
you don't want to overcapitalize.
Yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, it's going to take X amount of years to get that money back. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on? Yeah. That?
I think, like, I might give you another example of a property just recently. So this was a 2-bedroom house in Panania. Now, when I'd appraised it, I basically said to the purchaser of that property, it's not rentable. I can't rent this for you. It's terrible.
Wow.
And I said, look, at a bare minimum, you've got to do paint and carpet. And the owner was prepared to do that. So he spent about, he polished the floorboards himself. So it wasn't a great job, but he doesn't plan to hold it for particularly long term. But I think he ended up spending about $6,000 on paint and flooring, timber flooring. And then I said, in addition, can you just get a door installed on this living area? There was a second living area. I said, install a door on it. We can call it a 3rd bedroom. And can you put some built-in wardrobes in? It already had aircon. Now, as a 2-bedroom with just fresh paint and flooring, I appraised it at $450 to $500. But for the sake of a $300 door, and he actually got the wardrobes in the end off marketplace, we actually leased it at $625. So,
was that $200 extra a week? Sorry, am I hearing that right?
Almost, yeah. Just for making it a 3-bedroom, because something about the entire region that we're talking about today, all of Southwest Sydney, is it is in demand by families. And I think that's something that's really important to note, is that it's a family-friendly area. We have, you know, universities in, you know, in Campbelltown, Liverpool, Bankstown. We have an abundance of
UWS
schools,
or WSU these days.
Major schools. Like and some of the schools in the Southwest are very well sought after, particularly in Picnic Point. And I think it's Holsworthy, the public schools. They're so sought after. And the whole area is just so family-friendly that you like having a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom house or duplex, like that's what's really sought after by the demographic, like the tenants in the area. They need family-friendly homes, because being an affordable area of Sydney, this is where the families are flocking. They need affordability.
Yeah, and I guess if you're a family,
you're going to totally rule out a 2-bedroom house. So on the filters of real estate and domain.com, you're going to say, you know what, I don't want this. I'm just going to go three beds plus, which is what we always say when it comes to value add, when it comes to renovation as well. It's your job is to appease the valuer. Like you've got to appease the bank and get a better valuation if you want to withdraw your equity, if you're not going to sell it. Like if you're going to sell it, you're going to do things a slightly bit different in your renovation to if you want to appease the valuer. So if you can add a wall, add a door, it's going to make such a massive impact on the equity, because all of a sudden you're not in the 2-bedroom criteria, you're in the 3-bedroom criteria, and that is on median house prices $80,000 more, $100,000 more. And you've then got that instant equity. That's what I love I love a 2-bedroom because it's not always possible, but most of the, no, maybe not most, probably 50% of the time, some of the time, you can add a 3rd bedroom somehow and then get that instant equity growth. And not only that, exactly what you're talking about, Mel, a massive uplift in rent. It's awesome.
Yeah. But as I said, the difference of almost $200 just for adding a $300 door.
Yeah, how much did he? Yeah,
really
exactly.
I appraised it at I said $450 to $500 at the time, and then by adding the door, I appraised it at between $600 and $650. We leased it at $625.
So I guess my thoughts are I look at things from a purchasing standpoint and a renovation standpoint. How do you think about that difference, like as a property manager? You've gone from 450 to that.
I guess what I usually encourage people to do, I've got what I call my investor support service, where I basically encourage people who are looking to buy to contact me about any property that they see on the market that they're thinking about looking at. And I actually ask them to send me the link first, and I give them a bit of a rental appraisal from the photos. I usually look at the floor plan, and I usually give them an idea of, okay, how in demand is this property going to be for tenants in this area? Because if they say, oh, I'm looking to invest, and then they send me a 2-bedroom villa, I might say, oh, look, is that all you're looking at? Because, if you sent me a 3-bedroom villa or a 3-bedroom house or whatever else it might be, then that's going to be in more demand. You're more likely to achieve a higher price than what you're even expecting as well, because even though rental bidding laws have been, you're not allowed to do that in Sydney anymore, people still offer money. Just because we're not allowed to discuss it as agents doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Tenants still throw money over and above the.
Well, and I think what I sort of heard was happening, or the way it can be not moved around, but is that people will just, I don't know who said this, but you just price it a bit higher than what it would have been, and then people will start to sort of say, well, I don't want to pay $1,000 a week, but I'll offer you $900 a week. So you
that's one strategy. It's not a strategy I'd recommend, if I'm completely honest. I think price the property at what you think market value is, because a lot of tenants are going to put so if you jump on realestate.com and you pretend to be a tenant, you put your budget in. They're not necessarily always looking at properties that are above their budget. But the thing is, when there's 30 people at an open house, which I had a property I showed on the weekend, about 30 groups came through, someone came up to me and said, oh, can I offer more money? And my response is, I can't legally have those discussions. Cut it straight off. I'm not going to talk to you about that. I can't legally do that. But you know what? We had 4 applications where people offered more, and it wasn't that it was underpriced. It was priced at an appropriate market value. It's just that there's no stock in Southwest Sydney, just like there is in, a lot of other places like Queensland or whatever. And people just do throw the money at you. Even if you try not to have those conversations, you say, I can't talk about it. They still do it. Like, even for a property that's appropriately priced.
Yeah, so what can you talk to those rules and what that exactly is? I didn't know what that new change was for. So you can't bid, you can't say, you know what, you need to give us $20 more to get it. How's it work?
Yeah, so the laws came in December last year, and basically if a tenant, if you're at an open house and a tenant says, oh, like, can we offer more money? We're not allowed to engage in that conversation. We have to cut that conversation off. If a tenant offers more, though, the landlord can still accept it. And this is legislation, though, for agents. It's not actually legislation for landlords. So a privately managed property, I believe the landlord can still have those discussions. It's in the Property Stock and Business Agents Act, not the Residential Tenancies Act. So the landlord can still accept the money. Agents just can't talk about it. And if we get an offer, so let's just say I have 10 applications and one person has offered more money, I can't go to the other 9 applications and say, oh, actually, I got an extra offer. Are you willing to match it?
It's not a rental auction.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I mean, that makes sense, right? That seems like a fair and reasonable
I mean, you say it makes sense, but it hasn't really changed a lot. I never had those discussions anyway. I believe they were unethical personally, even if they weren't illegal. The thing is, you market a property well, the people come. They offer it whether you talk about it. The other thing is that you used to be able to advertise with a price range in Sydney for rentals. You can't advertise with a price range anymore.
So it's just set 650. It has to be 650.
Yeah.
Huh, okay. There you go.
I
like that.
I didn't. Yeah, I've never had to. I've only ever rented 1 or 2 properties in Sydney. So there you go. We're learning stuff, Joe. Don't you just love this? That's what I love about these sessions. Like you just get to pick up so much stuff that you.
One thing I think that is kind of interesting, and I don't know if anyone else has done this, and this is kind of jumping in a little bit, but if you go to realestate.com.au,
rental properties in Australia,
you just type in, you want to understand where we're at in Australia for rental supply or housing supply for an area or anywhere. Just go to what is actually for rent. So if you just don't enter in anything, it goes for all of Australia. There is only 53,442 dwellings in Australia that are for rent. If you change that to house, it drastically changes it as well. So like when you say there's a massive shortage.
Whoa. Oh, no, him. Oh,
29,000. There are 29,000 houses in a country that has what, 25?
That currently are on the market for rent.
That are currently on the market for rent. And we are bringing in 200,000 more people. It's super interesting. Like it's,
and half of them, if you look, will probably say deposit taken, deposit taken, deposit taken.
It's like the under offer. You think you spot a good property and you click on it, you're like, oh, it's already under offer. It's not a good property.
Someone else has spotted that sucker before me. Well, this is why speed kills in deals. I was literally chatting to a deal today, and we had to found it, called the agent. We're going to buy this today. Let's do it. And that's just what you have to do when you see an amazing property. And what are some, actually on that, Melanie, what are some tips for property, tenants, right? Our investors might be rent investors, and they still have to rent a house if they want to invest, and they can't afford to buy a PPOR in Sydney, but they want to buy an investment. What are some of the tips have you got to secure a good rental? Have you got any tips and tricks for the vendor?
From a tenant's perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So I think, first of all, being organised and actually submitting your application the second you've seen a property, or even sometimes in advance of seeing a property. I think as well, making sure that your references know to respond to the agent who's doing the reference checks. I think that a lot of people miss out simply because their references are unreliable. A lot of property managers use automated software nowadays to do their reference check-in. So with us, the second someone submits an app, an email goes to their employer, an email goes to their property manager. If the employer is not the right, if it gets sent to a HR department, well, they might not reply for 2-3 days. Property's leased. We're leasing properties straight away. Making sure that your references are responsive. Also making sure, I'm a fan of people doing a bit of a cover letter or a pet resume if they've got pets, because, pets is a bit of a...
What's a pet resume?
A pet resume. So it's what it sounds like. It's a resume for your pet. They usually put a little photo in the corner. They talk about if it's gone to dog school and it's
if it has an Instagram page,
trained, if it's inside or outside pet.
Wow.
Even how different breeds of dogs will some like have different like I guess personality or traits or whatever. But we see a few pet resumes, and then even people talking
Does
about
it
how
help?
often they walk their dog. It really can. If you've got an owner who's really like, well, let's put it this way, not everyone knows that much about pets. I am a dog person personally, but I don't necessarily think that all properties are suitable for pets. So I want to make that clear that whilst I'm a pet friendly person, I know that all properties suit pets. But if I call an owner and go, yeah, tenant's got a dog, blah, 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 like is it inside or outside? Oh, I don't know. Like not having that information, an owner's more likely to decline it. Whereas if you've got that information that actually this is a large breed, it's outside, it's well trained, maybe it's a seeing eye dog, like having the correct information, which you can get from like a pet resume if a tenant creates it, can get you over the line for an owner or a property manager who may not know that much about your pet.
Well, and to me, what it points to, what it shows is that regardless of whether you're a landlord or whether you're a tenant, it shows that you've actually gone to the effort, like whether all the information, like of course we encourage people to be honest and upfront and all that sort of thing. But if you've gone to the effort of doing that, it shows that you're conscientious, at least in my book. Like if you can sort of, otherwise if you're going to turn up to a job interview, and your resume sort of it's got spelling mistakes in it, for example, or if you don't have a resume or something like that, straight away you're gonna get thrown in. You're not even going to get an interview in the first place. So that's what I suppose it talks to.
Yeah, 100%. That's any other kind of hot tips for tenants to?
Something I see a lot of that people should be mindful of is obviously my tip should be for investors. It's something that I look at for my landlords is if you send over a bank statement, make sure it's not going into debit. And make sure it doesn't say the local pub or club and hundreds of dollars to show that you've got a gambling problem. And lately we see a lot of OnlyFans actually on bank statements now. We see a lot of that now.
Coming soon to
I'm not going to not approve a tenant for that, but
I think could be savvy. What I want to say, I want to reel it back. I'm interested in learning about pet resumes. We'll have to talk about over a glass of red, but all three of us. So what I wanted to is let's talk about the first area that we were talking Canterbury Bankstown. So what is like if I'm investing in Canterbury Bankstown, what am I looking out for? Like what is good value? Like which areas should I be more? Which areas are a good potential? Which areas maybe should I are potentially overvalued? Like if that makes any sense.
So look, obviously I've said like I specialize in the Revesby area, where I guess like some of these suburbs, they're very, very popular is particularly Picnic Point. Now that's got one of the top rated primary schools in Southwest Sydney. I do see that tenants tend to pay a little bit more in that area for the exact same property, literally 5 minutes down the road. That's not in the catchment zone. So getting into certain catchment zones, I think, is very important. What I like particularly about Revesby as well is and the suburbs around Revesby is we've got a really great train line. It takes 15 minutes to get to the airport. It's just over 20 minutes to get to the city.
Is that the East Hills train line?
It was the East Hills. It's now the T8 Airport and South Line, and that line goes actually through like Liverpool LGA and Campbelltown LGA. So I think it's actually a great train line, and I think because from Campbelltown to Holsworthy in Liverpool LGA, then through to East Hills, Panania, Revesby, Padstow, and then off to the city. But particularly from Revesby, you can get the fast train. So I think Padstow used to be the main suburb of the region, but now that the fast train goes from Revesby, I've found that Revesby, Panania are more popular. But then Picnic Point itself doesn't even have a train line. It's a 20-minute to half an hour walk to get to the train station, but it's still the most sought after suburb in the area. But there's not a huge amount of investment properties, which is why it's in such high demand by tenants. It's a very owner-occupied suburb. Are you having a look at it?
I thought Joe was going to jump in, but what I was going to say, what that really what I'm thinking there is there's some real gems in there from Melanie on whether it be Sydney, but I think Sydney in particular. Public transport is absolutely critical in. I don't know if people have ever driven in Sydney traffic, but if you get caught in peak hour, it can take you sort of an hour and a half to go sort of 10 kilometers. Like, traffic can be ridiculous, and I can't see it getting much better because so that public transport. And the other thing, which isn't necessarily unique to Sydney, but is around the country, is school catchment areas. But I think in particular Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, I don't know too much about Adelaide and Perth, but the eastern states, they love the school catchment areas. Like and if you're sort of looking in these areas, if you're seeing a disparity of 100,000, 200, 300,000, it could be that your property that you're looking at is outside of that catchment area. So you might be thinking you're getting a bargain, but just be mindful of those kind of things. If you're a first time in Sydney, just be mindful of those sort of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you kind of see it, Melanie, in terms of rentals for those type of products? Like, is that kind of match what you see out there? Like, it needs to be
as I said, like the whole of Southwest Sydney is very family friendly. And, I'm putting emphasis, say, on the train lines, the schools, the unis, like these are all just such, from all the way through Campbelltown to Liverpool to Canterbury Bankstown, that's it's standard that there's so many schools. And I'm like, we've got private schools, public schools, religious schools, selective schools. I think there's even an agricultural school in Glenfield.
Yeah, it's Hurlston and Glenfield.
Yeah. So, and I think that, like, obviously kids are catching trains and things like that. So the public transport's definitely important. Being near the schools is definitely important. It's an affordable area. They're all families. They're pretty much all families in the Southwest. And, going back to the train lines as well, I know I'm putting a lot of focus on, Revesby because that's where I specialise. But say like Glenfield Station, for example, well, that connects Campbelltown to Liverpool and Canterbury Bankstown. It's a very central location, not to mention it has a train line going off to the new suburbs, Edmondson Park, and what's the other train line? I can't think of it now. But that's where like the new airport's going to go sort of out towards that area. Like there is going to be that new airport soon. And whilst I don't believe there's a proposal to... the proposals I know come from the St. Mary's area down towards south, towards the Macarthur region, but I don't know how far that train line goes.
Leppington probably, I think, as well.
Yeah, Leppington possibly, yeah. So from Glenfield, you can catch, it's 2 stations, I think, from Edmondson Park to Leppington. Like, and then the airport's going right behind it, sort of thing. So I imagine that airport going in, a lot of the new suburbs are going to be around that airport. We know that there's going to be people interested in those regions, but what about, there's still going to be people around Glenfield, Macquarie Fields and Casula and those kind of suburbs that are a few suburbs away from the airport, but there's still going to be demand in those areas.
What are your thoughts on, and I don't know how well you know the area, but somewhere like a Casula or even, what are your thoughts on those kind of areas? Because I grew up sort of Cabramatta way, and Casula sort of had that, I wouldn't say rough, it was probably less rough than Cabramatta way, but it was more of a, So what's Casula like these days, if you know much about it?
So look, I haven't leased a huge amount of properties in Casula. I do manage a handful, but have I had one on the market in the last 6 months? I don't think I have. But I did recently just appraise a property in Casula, and I did put it on the on that little slide I sent you guys before. So it was one that we recently sold, and I have also appraised it. Now that was a house and a granny flat. And as I started doing the research for it, I did find that there wasn't many granny flats available. So I think a granny flat should go fairly quickly. And as for 3-bedroom houses, well, as far as I could tell, most of them were on the market for probably, I think it was like 2 to 3 weeks was probably the average time for a 3-bedroom to be on the market. And something that I think lacks in the Southwest is a lot of agents don't necessarily appropriately advertise properties. I think if they spend a bit more time advertising and marketing the properties with good quality photography and things like that, and more strategic with their pricing, because I've got a little bit of a strategy I use, then I think properties would actually be on the market for less time. I see a lot of properties.
Could you share that strategy? Like, what is the strategy?
Share the magic.
Yeah. Okay, so you know how I said before, if you jump on realestate.com and you pretend to be a tenant, you put in your budget. And in Southwest Sydney, a lot of people are working to a budget. It's the affordable area of Sydney. And you'll notice that there's price increments that you can put your budget in. So it'll be like, you know, $500, $525, $550, $575. There's $25 increments. So I always appraise a property within one of those increments. So let's just say I've appraised a property, I'll say $550 to $575. Right. I chuck it on the market at $575 per week, and I prepare my landlords that if it doesn't go first open, you go to the next price increment. None of this $5 or $10 price drop crap. Go to the next increment, and these tenants are like, oh, there's a new property on the market.
New listing.
Ooh, there you go.
And I generally lease all of my properties by the second open. Like, a lot of them are going first, but I'm generally leasing them by the first or the second. And I think that if you don't use that strategy, a lot of other agents are just going, oh, yeah, we'll just do a $10 drop, because they're too scared to be like honest with their client. Half the time it's because they overprice it in the first place, but don't get me started. But, you know, just be honest with the client, and they're afraid. So they only do $10 increment drops, and that's not going to get you a new group of tenants seeing your property.
Yeah, that's such a great idea. I wonder if real estate agents do that. I haven't noticed.
Of course they do, Joe. They definitely
I'll be honest. I feel like I've just like given out one of my secrets here. I am not aware of any other agent who does that strategy, and it's such a simple strategy. It's just preparing the client that, hey, I think you like, and sometimes it'll be, I think your property's worth $550, but let's just try $575. If it doesn't go first week, we go to the $550. I don't know of anyone else who uses that specific strategy where they use the price increments that realestate.com sets.
Yeah, and I guess it's different for buying as well, because if you go at 575 and then you have to drop it down to 550, it looks like you're desperate and wanting to sell in a different way. Although it would hit the other bracket, but I feel like maybe for listings it's a little bit.
Just change the contact agent or something like that. But I don't know, that really appeals, because then you're just annoying people, because
I hate contact agent. Just put the price there.
Yeah. And you call them and they don't answer. So, well, I tried, but can you help me out?
Got 4 other properties we can buy instead. We won't look at one.
Exactly.
That's what's interesting about this is, there you've got 2. So let's. I know you don't necessarily do a whole heap down Campbelltown way, but what are you sort of seeing as investors down Campbelltown, and where do you sort of think they're? I've got a, wouldn't say heap of views on Campbelltown, but what are you sort of seeing in terms of the types of properties and parts of Campbelltown?
Yeah, I think around those regions, I mean, obviously, we all know that we like land. And I think that if you can get a property that has development potential, because we do see development for duplexes in that region too, but also just being able to put a granny flat on there. It's one of the cheaper areas of Sydney. They need affordable housing. Chuck a granny flat on. You got your 3-bedroom house at the front, 2-bedroom at the back. Make sure you've got the property very well fenced and easy access to the granny flat, and if possible, chuck some kind of parking for the granny flat and the house. But I would say house and granny flat. We see a lot of investors in that region who want to be able to build a granny flat.
So that's one of my concerns with granny flats. Some people's concerns is the rentability of them. How does that go in these type of areas? Like you said, that they're more affordable. So does a granny flat rent just as maybe not just as easy as a house, but would you be concerned at all to rent one of these things?
I have seen a huge increase in the rental demand for granny flats this year. Last year it had slowed down, but post-COVID, all the 2-bedroom properties slowed down. Like, whether it was a unit or a granny flat, all the 2-bedroom properties in Sydney slowed down because a lot of the tenants who rent these smaller properties were potentially working in hospitality, potentially working in retail, or potentially were migrating to Australia. So a lot of the people went back to their country of origin, and all these, 2-bedroom properties became vacant, and there was an oversupply. But migration's so up at the moment. Actually, this was, we put a property on the last day before we closed for Christmas. And when we reopened, we had the first open house. We had 70 people come through this 2-bedroom granny flat. And,
Wow.
don't get me wrong, it was modestly priced because it was Christmas time. The owner was happy with it. It was still an increase from what I had at least at last time. But 70 groups, we did a midweek and a Saturday, and I think we had 40 on the midweek and 30 on the Saturday. Like, that's a huge amount of people coming through a granny flat. And since that day, we're like, okay, let's start pricing granny flats a little bit higher. I had another one on the market for 500 in this region. And we had, I think we got 3 applications at $500. Don't get me wrong, they weren't the best applications. We ended up dropping the price and getting a tenant at a cheaper price, but we still had 3 applications at 500. And, a lesser agent probably wouldn't have even reference checked and just taken them anyway. So the 500 was achievable, but I will not skip on quality.
Yeah, exactly. It's just headaches in the future. I've done that before where I took the highest rental.
Is that what that post is about on yesterday, Joe?
I love that post, by the way.
For the people that may not know what the post is, I just re-signed one of my favorite tenants because she's an absolute gem. Because previous to that, I had a horrendous tenant that just destroyed the place. But I was silly enough to think that I knew better than my property manager because I was a first-time investor. It was the best thing ever. And obviously, I know marketing. I know if we advertise our property with 1 week free, why would people not want to go for that? But I don't know, that it didn't end up working out. I got a terrible tenant. She paid overs as well as getting her 1 week free and just trashed the place. And the references were terrible, but it was because I didn't listen to my property manager. Actually,
so Joe, just so you are interested, you're not alone. I have been asked that question before. And my advice to them was no. So and the reason is tenants who are good with their finances don't need a week's free rent. If they're good with their finances, they're good with their finances. You don't want to take the tenant who needs the week free to move. You want the tenant who can afford to pay their bond and their 2 weeks rent up front, and know what they're doing with their money.
Yeah, 100%. And like, you just do the math on it, like over 12 months, you just drop my rent by $3.50. Like, just don't give me a stupid free week. I know what I'm in for. It
sounds like a catch. I can sort of see why somebody who's just like, a reasonable sort of person, we're like, there's something wrong with that. There's something fishy. Why are they?
Yeah. What are some of the other things investors can do or what are some of the bad things that you see investors do, and what are some of the good things that we might be able to do a little bit better? Because that's definitely something I wish I knew at the time, but the property manager that I was with just didn't, like, it was one of those ones that didn't really care. So what are some of the questions to ask your property managers that care?
So I feel like this wasn't quite where you were going with your question, but I do feel the urge to point it out because we're talking about, houses and granny flats a lot. If you're buying a property that's already established with the granny flat on it, there's a lot of older properties that don't have their separate water meters. And in New South Wales, very specifically, you need to have a separate water meter. And in Sydney, a lot of people get confused with sub-meter and separate meter. So if you've got a house and a granny flat and you want to charge water usage, you need 2 Sydney water meters, not 1 Sydney water meter and 1 sub-meter. And I've definitely seen people buying a house with a granny flat already on it. And they say, I want to charge water usage. And I go out and I look at the property. As soon as I see the water meter, I'm like, you can't. And they're
how much does a Sydney water meter cost? Are we talking 100?
It's not that expensive to do, but where the problem would lie is in the excavation to lay the pipe in for it. That's right. Going like in this area, because we've got so many duplexes and some of the blocks here allow for there to be a duplex with a granny flat at the back. Now, if you've got a brand new duplex and the new pathway is all laid all the way down the side on this incredibly long block. That's a lot of concrete to rip up and relay. I've seen quotes that, might be like, I think I saw a quote for $6,000 a couple of years ago just to get the second water meter in. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, that's a big expense. Do I just include water in the rent? But where the problem lies with that is you've got your duplex and you've got your granny flat. Granny flat's maybe worth $450 per week, let's call it. You want to allow maybe an extra $10-$20 for water. But the thing is, then you're putting it on at $470 per week, and it's now it's above average market price for a 2-bedroom granny flat. So all these people with a budget of $450 can't see it, not knowing that they'd actually have water included, if that makes sense. So I think that if you're going to build a granny flat, I still see people building granny flats who aren't putting the separated water meters in, because the plumbers they're employing don't understand that there's a difference between sub meter and separate meter. And I need to spread the word. So
because I imagine, yeah, the plumber would say, they would say to the plumber, I want the cheapest possible thing. Give me the cheapest possible thing. Well, we can do a sub meter. No. I said the cheapest possible thing. And I imagine putting in, a Sydney
Sub
water meter. Yeah.
It's not necessarily that expensive. It's just people don't know what the difference is. And so, 2 Sydney water meters if you have a granny flat. One for the house, one for the granny flat.
There you go.
Yeah, that's solid. What else are you kind of seeing that investors could do better?
Landlord here.
Yeah, let's see. So I think that contacting the property manager, and I know we've already touched on this between us, but contacting the property manager before you do your renovations. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a market appraisal and they call me up, they say, Mel, come down, I've just renovated, blah, blah, blah. I come down, I was like, why are the walls blue? Or that was a real story.
Hope they're not listening.
Or
I love blue.
Or, like sometimes I've seen things where you could have added in the wall and added in a door and made some more money, but they've already laid the floors, so it's kind of too late for that. I just think, maybe sometimes even if you've got an older house and you want to put a kitchen in, I think it's nice to have, like, say, a stone bench top. But sometimes I've seen people waste money on getting like the really the thick stone. It's like, hey, if it's
Italian
stone,
marble
just
kind of bench tops.
Yeah, just go for the basic white. Unless you're trying to create a wow factor property, which, by the way, there are some properties in Southwest Sydney where wow factor pays off. But, if you've got a 1960s built house that isn't fully renovated throughout, you don't need to go get this, 60 mil stone and things like that is marble. You can just go get the
Save that for the PPOR.
Yeah. But I guess it is important to know, and, we're talking about these unique aspects of Sydney, is that not every tenant in Sydney rents by necessity. A lot of them are renting by choice. So there is a market for wow factor properties.
Which parts of Sydney would you say is that? Yeah, I think we spoke about this.
Look, a lot of these brand new duplexes that I keep raving about, and it's because they're such a prominent part of my market. But I have a property on the market right now that is $1,500 per week. It's a duplex. Wow factor. Well, it's a wow factor property. It's in Condell Park. Yeah, well, half of the property. It's only 4 bedrooms, but it has a basement 6-car garage, and it has a pool, and it's got some other wow.
So free car spots per person, is that?
Yeah, I guess so. But when I actually conducted the open house myself on Saturday, and some people came through, and I was thinking to myself, I don't know, they look like they can afford this property. And I was like, no, Mel, don't be judgy. They might. Don't judge a book by their cover. But the truth is, after I got to know more about them, they were planning to use it as a tax deduction because they're earning too much money. So they've got a work from home business. They can use it as a deduction. So, these people could obviously go buy a property, but they're choosing to rent and claim this wow factor property, a certain aspect of it through tax, because they've got a work from home aspect to it.
Okay, there we go. There's another.
And that's not the only property I've got like that. I've got more than one $1,500 duplex.
That's unreal. Okay.
What's
So, yeah. Sorry, go, Jeff.
I was going to say, what sort of roughly would these properties be selling for? Are we talking sort of 1.5 million? Are we talking 2 million? I mean, I don't really know that, but just at a rough estimate.
I'm just
thinking
trying
the
to
yield on
think
that
out.
sounds pretty good.
This is my favorite thing is when you ask a property manager about prices. It's the same
sale
when you
price?
ask a rental, like when you ask a real, like a
salesperson
selling
for a rental
agent
price, and they just
About
tell
how much
you
it'll
what
rent
it
for.
is.
My favorite, it's favorite when the agents are like, it's going to be between 500 and 700. I'm like, really? Is that range?
Are we talking the higher end or the
reason-
lower end? Yeah.
Yeah.
I said before, I've got this investor support service, and one of the key things I spruik about it is if you see a property you like, I don't care which agency it's with, it could be any agency in the area. If you see a property you want to buy, send me the link and I will give you a non-bias rental appraisal. Because the thing is, if you take what the salesperson says as gospel, and that's how you're doing your sums, and then I come in to do a market appraisal after you've already settled, and I go, oh yeah, you're only going to get 500, but the sales agent said 700, you're going to regret not speaking to a property manager before you made that purchase.
Yeah. 100%. And I think you need to kind of collect your property manager, you should collect your A team before you even go out there and purchase a property. Have someone in mind, because when you're doing your due diligence on an area, like if you don't know anything about Campbelltown or Revesby or anything like that, you need to be speaking to property managers themselves anyway. And then you're going to gel with someone. You're going to speak with someone and be like, oh my gosh, like Melanie, you're on point. You know what you're talking about. You know the areas. You know you're an investor mindset. You're not one of these property managers that is like, you know, everyone you got to look after your tenants, obviously, but there is a rare breed of investor-focused property managers, and if you just reach out to them, you'll find them very quickly by asking. Actually, what are some great questions to ask a property manager to find out if they're going to help you as an investor?
I don't think I've been asked that question before.
There we go.
You know, actually something that happened the other day that I thought was quite interesting is, and I would listen to Ashley Goodchild's webinar thing
She
the
ran
other
a live
day.
session, didn't she? Yeah.
And
Monday night.
She made something that she made a comment about was how often she'll do like a final inspection for a purchaser. Now, that's something that doesn't necessarily happen a lot in Sydney, because a lot of the people who buy in Sydney are from Sydney, whereas a lot of people who are buying in Perth are from interstate. And I had a husband and wife were sort of, the husband was meant to organise the final and he didn't. And then the wife called me and asked me to do the final for her. And the husband came in and he apologized. He said, I'm so sorry. It was so inappropriate that we asked you to do the final inspection. And I said, no, like, it's fine. I don't mind doing your final inspection. He thought that no property managers did that. And the thing is, in some states, I guess it might be a bit more common, like in Perth, where the investors are in a different city. In Sydney, it's probably not that common. So maybe that might be a good intro question that, hey, I'm looking to buy an investment. This is what I'm looking at. If I send you a link, would you mind giving me an appraisal? One, that's something that not all property managers do. Two, if I'm unavailable, would you be willing to do that final inspection for me? Those two key things, there is not many property managers in Sydney who'll do that. But to be fair, they don't get asked often. And if someone asked me that question, I would say, look, I don't get asked to do it often, but I'm happy to do it. For that client who couldn't make it to the final, I went through and I filmed a video. I pointed out all the things that need to happen before the property could be leased. I gave them their rental appraisal, and I'd given them a rental appraisal before I'd even seen the property based on the advertisement anyway. But yeah, I think that's not something that happens in Sydney a lot. So if you wanted to find an investor-focused property manager, asking them to appraise off a link and asking them to do a final inspection might help weed out a few people. Even if you don't plan to use them for the final, just asking if they'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, actually, yeah. What's their willingness? What's their willingness to do it?
So I'm actually doing it. Yeah, interesting.
And it's just showing like that you go over and above, really, in a sense. Like it's maybe not weeding out particularly the investor focused. Another question would be, judging by that link of the property that I'm planning to purchase, is there anything else I could do to get higher rent? And that's something, those are things that I focus on in my investor support service. Is when they send me a link, I tell them the pros and cons of the property. And I might say, look, I noticed the property's got tired carpet. I recommend changing that to be a timber look flooring. I noticed the property doesn't have aircon. I recommend putting aircon in. The property doesn't have built-ins. I recommend putting those in. So I'll also let investors know about things they may not realize they have to maintain in a property. So if they sent me a link to a property with a pool, when you look at that contract, make sure it's got a certificate of pool, the pool compliance in it. Because in New South Wales, you can sell a property with a certificate of compliance or a certificate of non-compliance, but you can't lease it unless the pool's compliant. So making sure that it's a certificate of compliance in the sales contract, and even making sure that there's a certificate of the registration of the pool in the sales contract as well. I've seen that not happen before.
Wow. And that's a great little test of testing the property manager of like, what do you think of pools? And what should I do if I've got a pool? And then if they just say what you've said, great. Okay, cool. You understand what you're talking about. And if they don't, then you might be best looking at another one. Another good one thing to notice one thing to mention, if you're buying in other states, like in WA, you can do pre-settlement inspections. In South Australia, they don't have pre-settlement inspections. It's a weird little eccentricity. So don't go there. I was literally chatting to an agent today, and she's like, by the way, we don't do pre-sale. I'm like, I know that, but it's a good point to kind of understand the state a little bit more. But
I still don't understand why they don't do that though. But
I don't understand. Well, yeah.
Could you request
Sorry,
it,
just
though?
an extra thing they have to do.
You have to actually put it in the contract. You have to set the clause up as, pest and building 14 days, but finance 14 days, and then, pre-settlement inspection. But then you can't pull out anyway, and they don't have to fix anything. That's what your insurance is for. I feel like Jeff, have you got any kind of questions that you ask your property manager to pull out some gems to get them rocking and rolling? Are there any kind of go-to questions?
I usually like to ask, there's definitely those investment. The one I usually like to ask them is, if there's a problem, how do you handle it? I like to understand that process, because it's not so much I'm looking to see how they solve the problem, because if they just tell me, if they give me a very non-specific answer, then I'm like, okay, that's a bit of an amber flag to me. Whereas if they can say, here's the process we follow, then that way at least it shows that if somebody else has to take care of the situation, because sometimes a property manager may be on holidays, what processes and policies does the company have? That's what I like to know, because if that property manager leaves, go.
I think that's a great question to be asking, though. I actually saw, and I don't know if it was in Oz Property Investors page now or not, but I saw someone asking the other day, what kind of a rent arrears percentage should I be looking out for when I question a property manager, or what vacancy rate should I be, if I ask the property manager what's their vacancy rate, what's a good percentage I should look out for? Yeah. And I sort of commented back saying, look, those stats are good, but what's more important is that the agent knows the stats rather than what the actual number is, because an agent who doesn't know those stats is potentially they're obviously not aware of their software. Like, I'm not going to say I know every single stat off the top of my head, but I can easily access it. I know where to find it. I know where to get the answers to that question. But what's more important, when we talk about the percentage of arrears, is how an agent, what their actual procedure for rent arrears is. Rent arrears is a problem. How do you solve that problem? Some agents only chase rent arrears after a tenant's 14 days behind. Or, I chase rent arrears when it's 1 day behind. I don't want it to be a day. A day is too many. It's pretty common for it to be a 3 to 7 period. And so, if you're talking about how do people solve a problem, well, okay, we start chasing arrears the next day. Other agents are going to say, after 7 days. So it's less about the percentage and more about what the actual process is that goes with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you actually get around the solution? Like, how do you solve my problem? Because a number's just a number's just a number. Another question that I like to ask is, how many managements have you got under your one under your agency, and then what does that look like per property manager that you have? What do you see?
You must get
I
asked
love
that
it.
probably like 10 or 15, 20 times a day, maybe. Or...
I don't get asked it a lot. It's actually something I use to put in other people's minds, because I think that there's a lot of people who don't know to ask it. And part of the problem with our industry is that a lot of property managers have crap customer service because they're overworked. Now, in my office, for example, like our whole agency, we look after about 600 properties, but my property managers are capped at 150. I refuse to let them go beyond that. But on top of that, we also have support staff, and it works out to be 1 staff per 75 property ratio. And I know of other local agencies that are like 250 to 300. And I just think, I pick up properties from that agency, and the feedback is always, oh, they never returned my call. They never returned my call. The reason, you see so many posts in the Facebook page saying, oh, my property manager's crap, blah, blah. 9 times out of 10, the reason they're crap is because they're overworked. The reason that they're overworked is often because people negotiate the fees. So when the fees are cheaper, that staff member has to manage more properties. So I do have higher fees than most of the agencies in my region, but you know what? Our customer service is better because my staff aren't overworked. I also retain my staff for longer because they don't hate life. They're not going to bed going, oh, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. My property managers go home on time. I make sure they're not managing too many properties. They have good customer service. They're less stressed. They can, if they have time to respond to their owners, they also have time to respond to the tenants. And if the tenants are happy, they're more likely to stay in a property long term, which is them going to have a better rental return for the landlord. When we want to increase the rent, they're more likely to be okay with it. Respecting tenants is a big part of having a good landlord experience. Is your tenants will be happy and they will respect you if you respect them.
Yeah, and what are some of the mistakes that you see investors making with their tenants? Because it's so easy just to say, well, I'm this and you need to do this.
I'm the big boss person.
I'm the big boss.
We are seeing a lot of those high increases at the moment, which, look, I support a proactive rent increase. I very much support a proactive rent increase. But we're doing these huge jumps. Everyone's so financially stressed at the moment. Everyone is. I'm more of a fan of a slow and steady wins the race than, hey, let's jack the rent up so high that your tenant hates you. They're going to probably report a bunch of repairs that weren't even necessary just to get back at you, or they're going to vacate. By the time you've got a 2-week vacancy period and paid a let-in fee, was it even worth it? It probably would have been better to be negotiable and keep the good tenant in there. I think that's a big thing, is that doing these huge rent increases at the moment. And some are warranted, some aren't. I am seeing rent increases that are landlords are asking us to go beyond market value some of the time. And we say, we don't recommend it. And it's just tough. I pay you, do it for me. And I just think, all right, well, when your tenant goes, don't be sad that you can't achieve the price I just told you can't get. So that's a mistake I do see. Probably another big mistake I see is landlords, and this may not happen as much in other states, but once again, in Sydney, a lot of our landlords also live in Sydney. In fact, a lot of my clients live within a 15-minute drive of me. A lot of people who want to do their own repairs to save a buck. But then try and actually get them out there, because we're in Sydney-siders, they're time poor, trying to get someone out to the property to do their own repair. And even just delaying the inevitable, if you oh, can you get me 5 quotes, or can you get me 3 quotes, or something like that? The tradespeople who are on my books, if they were expensive, I wouldn't use them because everyone would complain about them. I already have reliable, well-priced trades on my books. So let's just go ahead with the first quote, which is probably going to be the cheapest, rather than delay the process by 2-3 weeks and upset your tenant and then have them get frustrated the next time you go to increase the rent because you're so slow with your repairs. So that's another mistake I see. Landlords just trying to do their own repairs, or, trying to get multiple quotes just to save a buck. And particularly during a vacancy period, I got talking to one guy who was doing all his own renovations, which, that saves you a lot of money. I guess it sounds like a good idea until it takes you 6 months and you could have just done it in one. And then you've lost on all that rent, not to mention not having invoices for tax purposes.
Yeah, you've just got the Bunnings couple of $1,000, but all that time, energy, and effort, and you can't do much with the tax. That's a really good point. Okay. Well, I am just cautious of time because we are closing in on it. What I would like to, anyone that has any questions, throw them in the mix, because it would be good to unpack and learn those. And then we will dive a little bit deeper into the world of property management. After it.
We're gonna.
This live session is sponsored by Scott Agate from Hello House. Scott has created the world's first property negotiation as a service business. So what does that mean? Well, let's think about it. When was the last time you negotiated on anything over $100, let alone a property that is going to be one of the biggest investments of your life? The vendor, they have a trained negotiator on their side in the form of a real estate agent. That's kind of like you stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson after never training a day of boxing in your life. These guys are trained professionals, and that's what they do day in and day out. And this is what Hello House does every single day as well. They negotiate on property to get the best buy price from the real estate agents. Scott Agate, he's the expert negotiator. He has been in this industry since 1995. He owned and operated 3 Bell franchises. Scott was the guy that was teaching these real estate agents all these agent games. He knows all of their tricks. Having him on your side is going to give you a massive unfair advantage and literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. Unlike other ways of purchasing property, Scott's incentives are aligned with you, the buyer, meaning the more money he saves you, the more money he makes, which is what you want. You need to have those incentives aligned. Scott has kindly offered our group a massive discount on the retainer fee for his service. So if you're looking to buy your next home or investment property, click the link below to get in touch.
Oh, no, I'm on the...
Uh-oh. Help me out here, Jeff. It's just me here. It's just me in the show.
That's a good one. We had some good questions come through. The one thing we will get you to do before we finish off is get the crystal ball out for what you sort of see the future of renting in Sydney. But I hope you brought one along. But there's some great questions that have already sort of popped through, and one of them is
okay. Sorry, let's jump to the question. What have you got, Joe?
What were you going to say, Joe? It sounded important.
No, it was just a crystal ball at first. But
okay.
What is your approach at the end of a fixed lease term and tenant wants to go to month on a lease?
I don't necessarily see that as problematic, depending on who your landlord's insurance is through. So a lot of landlords' insurance policies won't cover a month-to-month lease, but if you've got an insurer who specializes in landlords insurance, which all the property managers in the group talk about this, that specialize in landlords insurance, some of the big names like EBM and Terry Shear, they're not necessarily as affected by not having that fixed term lease. I guess it depends on what your future goals are as well. A tenant has to give you 21 days notice if they choose to vacate after their lease expires. That's a perfect amount of time for advertising in Sydney. You usually find a replacement tenant before the property is even vacant, as long as it's well marketed. And, if you choose to terminate the tenancy later down the track after a fixed term expires, it's actually quite a long notice period. It's 90 days. And I think a lot of people go into this month by month tenancy, a periodic lease, and think, we'll just let them go month to month because I want to move in soon. And then when they call us and say, I want to move in or I want to sell it or whatever it might be, and I say, you've got to give a 90-day notice period, all of them go, what? I thought it was only 2 weeks, or I thought it was only 30 days. I don't necessarily think month-to-month tenancies are problematic as long as you're covered by your insurance. But the notice periods either way are a decent amount. That's probably just worth noting.
Super interesting. Yeah, you don't even think about that, right? It's like, oh, just pop my month to month. It'll be fine. But do you typically see a tenant that does that want to get out of the property, like they're in 3 months, they're gone, or it's just, hey, I like the freedom. I like to be free.
Yeah, I think they do like the freedom. A lot of the time it's because they're planning to buy. But obviously Sydney's a hard place to buy, and they think, oh yeah, I'm going to buy a house in 3 months. And then before you know it, 2 years has passed. So a lot of the time I think it's because they've got goals to buy. On the flip side of that, having a fixed term lease in New South Wales, the break lease fees are pretty cheap. So sometimes having a fixed term lease isn't even worth it. If you're in a fixed term lease and you're in the last 3 months of your tenancy, you can just pay a 1 week break lease fee to get it out. Whereas if you're in a month-to-month tenancy, you actually give 3 weeks notice. I'd rather have 3 weeks notice than a 1 week break lease fee, quite frankly. But because you might not be covered by landlord's insurance, you've got to really assess what's best for you. But I don't think it's either or there.
Yeah. Who are some of the good insurance providers to do better landlord insurance that are easy to deal with?
I love EBM and Terry Shear, and I think everyone in the group says the same thing. There's a few other ones that I've seen other property managers talk about, but I'm a big fan of EBM and Terry Shear.
Terry's amazing.
I used to be a bit. I still am a little bit slack. I use the one of the car providers. I really need to look at that. But
what budget?
Admin things. No, not budget. I wasn't. It's the one the ad where they say lucky you're with that person.
With someone.
It's Amy. It was just convenient because I had car insurance. I have car insurance.
Yeah, it's the same login.
Some things to consider is, first of all, if any of your tenancy leases have expired, whether or not you have coverage, the excess in the event that you need to make a claim is probably, in some of those other policies, is probably going to be the value of a whole bond, in which case you've got no money left for cleaning, rubbish removal, or garden maintenance, which is not covered by landlord's insurers.
And that's not cheap. Garden maintenance.
If you have a tenant vacate with damages, cleaning, rubbish removal, you want to use the bond for the cleaning and the rubbish removal, and then you want to use the insurance to make a claim on the damages and the rent. But if you've got a policy where that excess is so big that it's the value of the bond, you're out of pocket basically the value of the bond. So definitely have a look into that. Also, whether or not you're covered for a pet policy. Some of those companies that specialize in landlord's insurance might have a pet policy. If you're not with one of those companies, you might not. And the other thing is the difference between accidental and malicious damage. So malicious damage, I've been doing this job for 17 years. I've looked after thousands of properties. Tenants aren't causing malicious, not many tenants, if you choose a good tenant, are causing malicious damage. Most of it is accidental damage. And the only companies that cover accidental damage are companies that specialize in landlord's insurance. So I think there's a Terry Shear ad where someone spills red wine on the carpet. That's not malicious, that's accidental. And if you're with a company that doesn't have accidental cover, you're not covered for that red wine.
Yeah. I remember I had a quick story is someone was doing that. They had a terrible tenant, like my tenant. I think I was whinging about my tenant to them, and they're like, yeah, well, look at the insurance. I didn't even go for insurance because the excess was so high. It ended up being $3,000 worth of work. And I used to think, I was a beginner investor.
Self-insured, did you know?
It's like when you get insurance and then you claim and then they charge a higher premium for the next year. I thought that was the case. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. Anyway, and there was holes in the wall, but they're like, we're not fixing this one because that wasn't malicious. So we're going to fix this one. Sorry, that was the door banging into the hole, the door handle into the wall, but we're going to fix that one because that one's a punch, but this is a hole in the wall from the door and they didn't fix it. That's how petty some of the insurance and they
probably have an excess per hole, whereas some of the other companies that specialize in landlord's insurance just have an excess if you just say
for
it's patch walls and painting, that's one excess. But other companies will be, that wall's got an excess, that wall's got an excess, that wall's got an excess.
Jesus. There's a cool question that's come up here. It says, "Hey guys, great listen as always. I am just settling on
DJ.
a Woodbine in Campbelltown property on Monday. 3-bed and a 2-bedroom, and there's a 2-bedroom granny flat on it. Good on you, mate. Would you be keen to manage it if I need? I am just keeping the same management for now for easy settlement." So, I guess that's the question to you. But maybe answer.
I would be, but just bear in mind, for easier settlement, what's necessarily easier about it?
That's where my question was going to lead, is what happens with a property manager when you buy a property that's already got an existing tenant in place, and what does that look like? Because in my initial thoughts are, well, they got all the information, they got all of that stuff, and they've got to do it before, and obviously, the tenancy is for another 6 months. That means I need to stick with this property manager for 6 months. None of that is true. What happens? Can you give me a run through?
So it's not too different from just changing agents any other time. Basically, the purchaser will contact the property manager of choice. That property manager says, "Hey, I want to pick up the file when it settles." We give them a list of everything we want to pick up. And then on settlement, we go pick up the file with our own little checklist. We pick it up on the day of settlement, and sometimes there will be an adjustment that needs to get made. Now, sometimes when you purchase a property, the solicitor will make the adjustment. Sometimes it's the property manager who makes the adjustment, but it's not anything that's so difficult that we can't handle when it's between different agencies either. I've literally done one this week.
So you can do it even though there's 6 months left on the lease?
Yeah, you don't have to wait for a lease to expire. In fact, and this is something that, because a lot of people think what you just said, I actually think when the lease is about to expire is a terrible time to change property managers, because the tenants go, "Oh, I'm getting a new property manager. What's going on? Oh no, my lease is up for expiration. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to get kicked out?" I actually think changing agents midway through a lease agreement is better.
Interesting.
It just puts tenants into a panic. They think their lease is up for expiration and they're changing agents. What's going on?
Interesting. Okay.
Somebody's about to clean house. But yeah, this Kushil's asked this question twice. So I think for his tenacity and persistence, we have to answer it. Just an interesting one as well. That's because I was not necessarily proud of this, but we didn't have it. It wasn't me, but it was somebody else I knew, and we may or may not have mentioned there was a cat.
With Steph.
Yeah. So yeah, what happens in that situation if you were to find that? What do you do then?
So what does it say? A tenant lease is without a pet and then goes and gets a pet after securing the property. What do? Kick him out. Oh God.
They go and get one after. Yeah, they get one.
Yeah.
They didn't have one at the start.
It's a very mature
I guess
dog.
I feel like there's okay, so is it that we've just approved the property and then the tenant before they move in says, "Oh, by the way, I have a pet," because that happens. They literally say it before they even sign the lease. They pay the deposit, then they tell you. And sometimes someone will be living in the property for 3 months. You go do the inspection and then you go, "Oh, hello, there's a pet here." When that happens, I guess I think a lot of landlords get really hung up on the dishonesty factor of it. And the truth is, if we can empathize with tenants a little bit, it's hard to find a property if you've got a pet. If we had called you proactively and said, "Hey, I have an application for you. It's, mum, dad, 2 children, and they have a dog," some owners would have actually approved them anyway, but they just want to kick them out because they're hung up on this idea that they got a pet dishonestly. So if we can just put the dishonesty part to one side for a moment, because we need to empathize that tenants are scared. They are scared. We're in a rental crisis. So take the dishonesty part out. It might make me a little bit irritated too, but let's assess the situation as a whole. Would you have leased to these people if you knew they had a pet? And then it's a matter of going, what kind of pet is it? Let's assume for this it's a dog. Is the dog coming inside going to be very problematic to the kind of property you have? If you've got a property that's carpeted, then you might think, nah, dogs are a no-go. It's going to just make the house stink. But if you've got a property that's tiled throughout, or floors that are less likely to get scratched or anything like that, then why do you necessarily care about there being a dog in the property? Are they a great tenant? Do they keep it clean and tidy? Do they pay their rent on time? Are they, is the rent good? Like the figure good? Do they report like an unnecessary amount of repairs? Are they difficult to deal with? There's a whole thing that we need to assess before you go, I'm going to kick a tenant out just because they have a dog. Like, your property might be appropriate. You might have approved it anyway. And then, if you do find that they had a dog without permission, maybe at a routine inspection, it's a matter of maybe just saying, okay, well, I'm going to get you to sign a pet agreement. Now, in New South Wales, you can't ask for carpet to be steam cleaned unless there's been a pet. So you would put that clause in there. You also can ask for there to be a pest control conducted at the end of a tenancy. If they've got a pet, you would put that agreement in place. You'd get the tenant to sign this agreement. You might even put other stipulations in there, such as the dog is not permitted inside, or maybe that the dog is not permitted on carpeted areas, or whatever it might be. You might have other stipulations, but I don't think it's worth terminating a tenancy from the get-go just on the fact they've got a dog. Let's reassess the whole thing.
Well, can you make them sign with this magical agreement to let you have a pet? Like, can you actually make them do that?
Say, sign it, or I'm terminating this tenancy, because it's a breach of lease. If you didn't give them consent to have
breaching
a pet,
a contract,
yeah, they're in breach, and you can terminate. And getting them to sign an agreement doesn't have to be that hard. I use software where I literally type an agreement and it's sent to them in text, and they just have to click the link and go okay, and then sign it with their fingertip. Like, they can sign an agreement in 30 seconds.
Yeah. And have you seen, like, a pet's such a bad thing? Like, are they such a terrible little nightmare?
Bad tenants are a bad thing. You can have a bad tenant without a pet, and you can have a good tenant with a pet. They're not necessarily a bad thing. There is the right pet for the right property.
Yeah, great point.
Dog like damage your property. I have seen it, but they're not all like that. There's a lot of great tenants, right? Great tenants.
What else can a dog do except for make it smell and fleas? But there's a good question here. You can't actually do that in Victoria. The legislation, which is probably coming to a Sydney near you.
It might. But I guess as well, one thing I'd probably assess, like, if landlords are scared about that, I don't think you have to be scared about it. Landlord's insurance has pet policies if you get a good policy. So protect yourself. Landlord's insurance is like under $500. Protect yourself. You can put those stipulations in place about whether or not the pet can be inside. Protect yourself. The other thing is the demand for your property that is pet friendly will be greater than your non-pet friendly property. So you have so many more tenants to choose from by considering if pets are right for you. And even furthermore, making a property smell because the dog got on the carpet or something like that. If anyone calls me before they renovate, I don't want you to put carpet down anyway. I want you to put, some timber look or hybrid flooring. So I don't recommend carpet in a rental property anyway.
Yeah. The
solid. It's going to get wrecked, probably. Likely.
Solid advice. I definitely
A
agree.
lot of tenants don't want carpet because of their allergies. So one of the things I particularly promote in an advertisement is when a property has no carpet. And because this is such a family-friendly area in the southwest of Sydney, and everyone has allergies nowadays, if I do an open house and I go, oh, is this suitable for what you're looking for? Like, oh, no, it has carpet. Kids have allergies. So, let's stop putting carpet in properties.
I understand the whole allergy thing. We need to have. We should get a health expert on, talk about. I just speak from my kind of. Wouldn't be a property podcast.
I want to know too.
Yeah, there's too many property investors want to know. Should we or should we not have allergies?
Is the excuse legitimate?
No, it's funny. It makes me laugh because I have a friend and he bought a new house and it had carpet throughout. And I was like, oh, wow, I thought you just said they did new carpets, but you've just got vinyl planks here. And he's like, oh, no, I have allergies.
I got allergies.
And I thought he was joking. So I just cracked up laughing. Turns out, no, he does. He has allergies, and he's like, no, I had to just buy $7,000 worth of flooring. And I'm like, okay,
It's a thing.
you do you, man. You do you. But I don't have a runny nose, so I don't know what that's like. I don't know what allergies are like because I don't have them. So
should we get the crystal ball out as a last?
I want
thing?
the crystal ball. Let's do the crystal ball, Melanie, as a final thing. What's the question, Jeff?
Well, I think for me, like you put this as where do you sort of see the rental sort of situation going over the next, I won't say 3 years because that's just too long a period, but over the next sort of 3 to 6 to 9 months, are you seeing listings, just sort of rental listings, continue to go down? Or is that where you're sort of thinking it may go? What do you?
Yeah. So look, I obviously monitor my own local market. I monitor it daily. This time last year, there was about 100. So the 4 main postcodes I usually monitor. There was 100 properties on the market at any one time this time last year. Right now, I think when I checked just before I came down, there was 49. So that's like the available properties has halved. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be another duplex on the market tomorrow, and there's going to be another duplex on the market tomorrow after that. But just the demand isn't stopping. And post-COVID, so many investors in this area sold because the prices got very nice for our investors who have potentially held their properties for a long time. We saw a lot of investors leave the market. Those properties were purchased by owner-occupiers. We need investment properties. There is so much rental demand. And whether you're looking to buy to live in the area or buy to live in the area, or you want to rent in the area, there is demand either way. Like there is people like the southwest of Sydney. In Canterbury Bankstown, it's such a central location. It's like half an hour to the beach. It's half an hour to the city. It's half an hour to Parramatta. It's such a central location that
it's got some great amenities as well. Like heaps of like Bankstown Central's, like the shopping is huge these days, and you got all those kind of markets around there as well. Like I think there's some.
But there's Westfields in Liverpool, there's Westfields in Miranda, there's major shopping centres, Narella and Macarthur and Campbelltown. Like families will always flock here. There will always be demand for a family home. And I think that's important to point out, that it's the family homes that I'm seeing a huge amount of demand in. Don't get me wrong, there's always going to be markets for 2-bedroom properties and the more affordable as well. But I think family home, you just can't go wrong. And I know that a lot of the investors in your page, they're going to be wanting to potentially look at land. So family homes, there's always going to be rental demand because migration is always going to come through Sydney. So I just, right now, if I speak to a lot of investors on the phone before they've purchased for my investor support service. And if I speak to all of them, a lot of them are saying the only reason they're holding off is interest rates. So as soon as everyone feels comfortable with interest rates again, everyone's just going to start buying. I do foresee prices going back up for sale because there's like the only thing stopping them is interest rates. And it's just because they're scared of the unknown. Once it's known, everyone will be comfortable again. And even, we had an election, was it last month? I saw a bit of nervous energy around before the election. Even post that, now there's confidence again in certain price brackets. So the confidence has already kicked in. That one break in an interest rate hike after the election, however many months away or whatever we might be before maybe interest rates go down or whatever it might be. Sorry, has my headphones just cut out there? No, you can hear me okay?
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I just went a bit funny. There's all the investors that I'm speaking to, the only thing holding back is those interest rates. So once they're confident again, we know they're going to start to buy again. And prices have already started going up. I've seen it for certain properties. I feel like in this area, there's properties for like 1.8 or something on the market. I feel like properties below 1.4, there's a lot more demand purchasing. After the 1.4, people like those are the properties that are hanging out on the market a little bit longer.
I think a little pocket I'd be concerned about, and it's been this case since even I was living in. I mean, still. Yeah, I would be concerned a little bit about Liverpool and just the amount of units that they built. And like I have friends developing sort of like 100-unit blocks there, or 100 sort of units in a block. And you just sort of say, well, I mean, yes, somebody might buy those, but I think there's a bit of an oversupply in that sort of unit market, at least.
Yeah, with the units, yes. I think maybe what's important to note, there's certain suburbs of the area though that don't have that many units. For example, in Revesby Heights, there is only one unit block in the entire suburb. In actual Revesby, we've only got 2 unit blocks in actual Revesby. So not every suburb in the area is inundated. It's just that, the Campbelltown city, the Liverpool city, the Bankstown city. In saying that, I just put a unit on in Bankstown 3 days ago, and I've had like 40 inquiries on it. And quite frankly, I was afraid I'd overpriced it. As a 2-bedroom unit with a courtyard, put it on at $575, and there was I think 30 to 40 inquiries on it already. It's only been on the market for 2-3 days.
Unreal. Well, this has been a very insightful conversation. I think we've covered so many different topics about property management.
Pet resumes and
pet resumes.
Tell
insurance.
your friends about the pet resumes.
Yeah, get it going. Get cover letters are even more sought after as well. But super insightful about the Sydney market. You were talking about your investor. So how can people learn more? There was someone that reached out and he's like, cool, I want to use you as my property manager. Awesome. That's what we want. We want good people getting good property management. But can you talk a little bit more about that investor service that you offer, and how can people get in touch if they want to learn a little bit more?
Honestly, all they need to do, a phone call first would be nice, but all they need to do is email me a link. So it doesn't have to be a property through my agency. We can have a chat first, but just email me a link to the property that you're considering buying. And the main things I look at are a unbiased rental market opinion. Now, obviously, I have to give a range on this. I haven't been inside the property, but I just try to give people some guidance. I usually give a fairly broad range, but I often have people come back to me and say, the sales agent said I could get this. And I have to say, the sales agent's wrong.
Well, yeah, let's best case scenario, you get that. Worst case, we get what's real, and do your numbers off what is really.
So it's about a sales agent's trying to sell you something. I don't care what property you buy, as long as you make a property that's able to be rented. So I benefit from being honest with you. My investor support service, I mainly give you the non-bias rental market opinion. I let you know if I think that it's a sought-after property in the region by the demographic, and I also would then let you know if there's anything I think you can do to increase that rental price, such as add aircon or built-ins or something like that, or chuck a door in, make a 3rd bedroom. Those are the 3 key things I focus on. And it's really just so people can make an educated decision, and they don't make a decision based on the salesperson who's trying to sell them the property. They make a decision based on having a property management, a rental specialist give them guidance.
And also, when it comes to, I see a lot of agents actually underquoting on rents, and people not feeling like, oh man, this is only a 2%. 5%, you have 4%, 3%. This is such a low yield. No. A good property manager will get you a better rent. So you might see some properties online that are like, oh, this one's only 450. Well, actually, that's a rubbish property manager. You can actually get 500. This one's only, whatever the number is. Always have a conversation with them, because they'll give you a real world estimate, and base your numbers off of that rather than what you believe or even what you're kind of seeing. Because
even how it's marketed as well can affect it. If there's a lot of similar properties on the market, and you've got agents who are advertising properties without professional photography, and they're looking quite tired and old, versus the exact same property but professionally photographed, the tenants are more likely to prioritize that open house. And therefore, you've got more people at the open house. And, not that this should necessarily be the goal, but you might get those offers of more money, or you might be able to price the property higher just because more people are interested in it, because it looks better online. And particularly in Sydney, and this is what perplexes me, you just spent like $1 million on property. Spend $200 on photos. Get the professional photos.
$2 million.
I mean, I do
Unreal.
videography for some of my rentals. You know, when my $1,500 properties, I do videography that salespeople do. I do floor plans. I get virtual staging. Don't get me wrong, not all properties need a video, but it can definitely be beneficial. If you've got a wow factor property and you're trying to get up in the 1500s, make your property stand out by like drawing attention to it with a video, like just like the salespeople do.
Because I mean, imagine if instead of for 1,400 a week, you could get that rented for 1,500 a week. That's if you outlay 1,500, you're going to make that back in 15 weeks, and then you're sort of making profit after that.
And also, the price of photos and videography and stuff for rentals is actually cheaper than it is for sales. I don't know the science behind that, but I guarantee you go to a sales department or a rentals department, you'll nearly always get a cheaper quote for photography from a rental department.
Huh. Okay.
Like it's kind of like when you tell people you need a venue for a birthday party versus a wedding.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like when you go to a valuer and you're like, hey, I'm buying this as a, for tax reasons, I need a lower quote or a higher quote. It depends on which one do you want? I mean, obviously.
I'm sure that doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen, obviously.
Hopefully.
Well, yeah, we've gone a little bit over, Melanie, but this has been an awesome session. Thank you very much for doing that. So the best way people reach out is via the link that's in the comments. Where is it? There it is. Is that the best way?
I'd probably say daystar.com.au. That's like the First National head office one. So you can just go to daystar.com.au. That's all right. daystar.com.au. Or alternatively, I would love if people would follow Melanie Poole property manager on Instagram.
On Instagram. Oh,
you don't see many property managers on Instagram either. So
are you on the top?
And there's a lot of, I'm not yet, I will be in the future, but I put a lot of educational content on my Instagram. So yeah, I try to make sure I'm giving value to the followers as well. So yeah.
100%. Well, people have loved it. Awesome. I think this has been unreal. Thank you very much. You've been a great part of the community as well. So thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge.
No
so let's get out there, guys. Let's go buy a property. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.